Don't like they have to find like new owners or?
No, I don't know. Okay.
Your dog bit me.
So here is the deal. There is actually another way to solve quadratics that we are not going to talk about. Okay, I'm being very 100% straightforward honest with you. Okay, there is a way to solve quadratics that is called completing the square. Completing the square is used in future math classes. I have it open for students to look at and work on in Alex, but I am not going to teach it to you up here. For a couple reasons. A, it doesn't work in all situations. B, it's not the easiest option to choose. I mean, I love the quadratic formula because, I mean, I do math all the time. Okay, but so you're going to see it in Alex, you might hear reference to it, but we just aren't going to cover it. We're doing what are the need to know things. And the need to know things from this category is the quadratic formula. Okay, the quadratic formula works in every situation. Guys, we are taking notes, so headphones need to be off. They need to be out. Put away. Sarah, your headphone needs to be out, please.
I'm taking notes.
I'm
still listening, I promise.
I need your headphones out.
Please?
No.
I'm listening, I promise.
Bro, just take him out.
Okay, so when we are dealing with the quadratic formula, it is exactly that. It is a formula. Okay, the formula is big. Okay, but I have never seen a state standardized test that doesn't give you the formula. Okay, so even if you don't have it memorized, you just need to know to like look on whatever reference sheet it gives you. The quadratic formula says x equals, now we often read this as negative b, but mathematically speaking, this really says the opposite of b, because we don't know if b is negative or positive, plus or minus the square root.
Why do you write it so high?
You'll see in just a minute, because it's going to have one fraction mark. B squared minus 4 times A times C
Right, children.
all over 2A.
B squared minus 4AC divided by 2A.
I remember when I was
Good job,
younger and
Mom.
I'd look at these problems and be like, no way I'm doing
Yeah, right. So the reason why I sort of told you that it's big to start with is because often my students feel overwhelmed by just looking at the formula. Okay, but here's the good news, right? A formula is no different than like distance equals rate times time. You plug something in for R, you plug something in for T, and then you do the math. Okay, so while here there's a lot more to plug in, it is just plug in numbers for a value and then use your calculator to help you get an answer. It is plug and chug. You just have to make sure the chugging part, the math part, the computation part, you're doing correctly. Okay? It works to solve any quadratic as long as that quadratic is set equal to 0. So if we want to use this formula, we're going to have a quadratic that is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, keeping in mind that equaling 0 was the same thing as equaling y. Okay. And if you really wanted to, I could show you exactly where this formula came from. It didn't magically just appear one day. Okay? There is a very clear proof as to where it is from using math that at your level you could understand. I just have a feeling you don't really care.
I care.
I don't.
You want to see the whole thing of where it came from? I can show you. I'll show you after lunch.
No.
Is it long?
Dylan.
It's long.
Yes.
Oh.
It's definitely a lot of letter math. It's a lot of letter math.
Yeah,
I'll show you after lunch.
Right. Oh.
Why they have to have that?
Okay? So, let's say we want to solve x squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 0.
Isn't that what we just said?
What do you mean, isn't that what we just wrote? Right, I'm writing this. I'm writing a problem that's in the correct form. I'm just now filling in numbers, okay? We would say that this is in the correct form to use the quadratic formula, right? Because we have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This is the form we want it in. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do to use the quadratic formula is we are going to find a, b, and c. I mean, at this point, we've been talking about trinomials, we've been factoring, we've been using those values of a, b, and c. So this should be a pretty straightforward step. Okay, what does a equal in this situation?
X.
1.
1, right? Because there's a 1 in front of it.
What is an X?
What does b equal? 7.
12.
And c equals 12. Are we okay with that statement?
Sure.
A is 1, b is 7, c is 12.
Is 0 y?
I mean, yeah, it's the same. If it was written as y equals that, it would be the same idea.
Oh.
Okay. Step 2. We are going to plug these values into the formula. Okay, so whenever we are plugging a value into a formula, we're doing a swap, right? We're replacing the letter with its new number. Noticing that none of these values, a, b, and c, do not bring the x with it. Okay, so if I have a formula, this is the formula we just said. My job is now to replace each of those letters with the new value that it equals. Okay, so instead of saying negative b, what am I going to replace b with? Well, what does b now equal? 7. So now b is going away, and in its place I'm putting a 7. Right? Plus or minus the square root of. Instead of saying b squared, what does b now equal? 7. Minus 4, that 4 is always a 4, it's part of the formula. Times a, what does a now equal?
1.
Times 1.
12.
Times c, which is 12. All over 2, which is part of the formula.
Can you just put us on our calculator?
Times a, which is 1. Now here's where you have to be careful. Yes, you can use your calculator to do all of this. However, you can't use your calculator to do it all in one step.
Oh. Oof.
So you have to know what steps you have to do to help you along the way. Okay? So at this moment in time, we are now here, right? We have this. Okay, we're going to talk about this more, but this 7 right here, it is really good to just get in the habit of putting it in parentheses. And some of you, actually many of you, have run into this issue when you're doing some problems in the Alex program, right? That if you don't put those parentheses and that value is negative, we get the wrong thing out of our calculator. Okay, so if you just always put those parentheses and you start a good habit, you'll never make a mistake there.
How are we going to do the plus minus on our calculator?
I'll show you. I'll show you. Okay? Once you get this, your next step. Oh, sorry.
He said no. Sorry.
Okay? Your next step is going to be to simplify under, this is a big piece, under the square root. So I have to rewrite because I turned the page, but you don't. Okay, so in your calculator, you only want to type in what is underneath the square root. Right? So you'll pick up your calculator and you'll put parenthesis 7 close parenthesis squared minus 4 times 1 times 12. You're going to type it in exactly like you see it, not including the square root. Only type in what's under the square root. Okay, and then when you hit equals, what number does our calculator say?
1.
1.
All that just to get one.
Okay, so that takes us to here. Are we okay with me just saying 2 times 1 is 2?
Yeah.
And not writing down a separate step for that?
No.
Your next step. Okay, your next step is either going to be to take the square root or to simplify the square root. And class, I like to put this together in one step because I cannot stress the fact that you should check and see if it is a perfect square first. Because one of the problems with, the quadratic formula always works, but one of the problems is that sometimes you can get a really large number under here. And if you start prime factoring it to simplify, you'll be like, oh, well, that just is 49. Okay, and it's a pain in the butt when you could have just typed it in your calculator to start with. So always try and take the square root first and see if it is a perfect square. Okay, this one we have a perfect square. What is the square root of 1?
1.
1. Okay, once you take that square root, the square root goes away. I would not say 6 plus 1 equals 7 plus. I did the addition sign is gone. Once I take the square root of this number, the square root is gone, and I am now here. All right, so now I have negative 7 plus or minus 1 all over 2. Again, your calculator is great and you can use it, but you have to use it correctly. We have to be careful in this next step. Our 5th step is that we are then going to calculate both options. Okay, so Bailey sort of brought it up before. There is no plus or minus button on our calculator. So we have to know that that means 2 different options. Option 1 looks exactly the same as option 2, except where this plus or minus sign was, one of those situations gets addition and one of those situations gets subtraction, right? I'm splitting that sign into 2 separate places. Yes, Dylan?
We leave at the same time.
We're like 2 minutes later than normal or something. You cannot type into your calculator negative 7 plus 1 all divided by 2 equals. You cannot type into your calculator negative 7 minus 1 all divided by 2 equals. If you do, no, because of order of operations. If you're going to put this in your calculator, you have to do negative 7 plus 1 equals.
Divide by 2.
And then divide it by 2. Right, so negative 7 minus 1 is negative 8. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4.
Oh, this is so much work.
It's going to feel like a lot of work to start with, but we wrote all the steps in between. It really isn't that long. Once you know the process, it's quick.